She used a stranger's phone to call 911. It was biometrically linked to the Mafia boss. The rain at Southwark Quay didn't just fall. It assaulted the pavement. It came down in cold, sharp needles, slicing through the industrial gloom of the Philadelphia docklands, turning the grit and diesel stains into a slick, black mirror. The air smelled of rust, the deep water rot of the river, and my own sharp panic. My name is Talia Quintero. I'm 27 years old, or perhaps I was 27, in that moment, running for my life. I felt ageless, just a collection of burning lungs and terrified muscle. My shift at the Anchor and Chain had ended an hour ago. It ended when two men in quiet suits decided to balance the books in the back alley with the bar manager. I'd seen it all through the cracked utility window while emptying the ice well. It wasn't a fight, it was bookkeeping, a violent audit. One man didn't get up. The sound of a skull meeting wet concrete was a flat, final thud that I couldn't scrub from my ears. I didn't wait to clock out. I just ran. Now, 10 blocks later, the polished click-clack of hard-soled shoes echoed behind me. They were too rhythmic, too calm for a random chase. This wasn't a mugging, this was a retrieval. I was a loose end. I ducked behind a stack of rusted shipping containers, my breath tearing from my chest in white plumes. I fumbled in my apron pocket for my phone. The screen remained black, dead. A 0% battery life. The panic became acidic, rising in my throat. A man strode past the gap in the containers, his silhouette sharp against the sickly yellow sodium lamps. He was walking fast, head down, arguing into a device held near his face. He wore a suit that cost more than my apartment. I didn't plan, I acted. I burst from the shadows, snatched the iPhone from his grasp, and kept running. Hey, his voice was a low bark of surprise, but I was already gone, disappearing into the maze of maritime equipment. I found cover behind a defunct cargo crane, shielded from the street. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped the phone. It was heavy, sleek. I pressed the side button, my thumb sliding on the screen, desperate to find the emergency dialer. The screen lit up. It wasn't a keypad. It was a Face ID prompt, a swirling digital assessment. No. I risked a glance back. The man in the suit was gone. He hadn't followed. My heart hammered against my ribs. I looked back at the phone, at the digital likeness of a face it was searching for. I was trapped. I was going to die here, smelling the salt and the rain, because of a dead battery and a locked screen. On pure, desperate instinct, I held the phone up to my own face. The lock icon snapped open. I stared. It had read me. It had scanned my terrified, rain-soaked, 27-year-old face, and it had opened. There was no time to question the miracle. My thumb found the phone icon. I dialed 911. The call connected instantly. 911, what is your emergency? I'm at Southwark Quay, I whispered, the words tumbling out. By the old crane yards, Pier 12. I witnessed an assault. At the Anchor and Chain. They're chasing me. Please. The dispatcher's voice was calm, but I didn't hear the rest. Headlights. Not police strobes. These were the muted, predatory beams of a black SUV. The kind that absorbs light. The kind that means business in a city built on favors and threats. The vehicle slid to a stop 20 yards away. The call had lasted maybe 30 seconds. What I didn't know was that the phone I held was not just a phone, it was a tripwire. The second my voice, unrecognized and unauthorized, activated that emergency call. It triggered a silent alarm. The call didn't just go to the Philadelphia police. It sent a high-priority, biometric breach notification to a secure server buried 5 stories beneath Altamari Holdings. The device was biometrically linked to its owner. That call had pinged my exact location, my voice pattern, and my desperate face straight to the personal security network of Rafe Altamari. I had never heard the name. I didn't know that Rafe Altamari owned the logistics that kept this key breathing. I didn't know that half the city was terrified of him, and the other half owed him their livelihoods. I just knew the men getting out of that SUV were the same men from the alley. They belonged to the Belmonte Trust. I'd heard the name at the bar, always in whispers, always connected to the new digital ATMs, the fintech startup that was helping small businesses like ours, the men who'd killed my manager. They didn't know I saw the murder. They must have thought I was a link, a runner, someone who knew too much about the river of dirty money they were washing through that fintech floor. They raised their weapons. I braced myself, clutching the stolen phone, and then he arrived. He didn't drive up. He didn't run. He materialized from the rain between me and the SUV, as if the storm itself had produced him. He was tall, wearing a long, dark coat that repelled the water. It was the man from the street, the owner of the phone. But he wasn't here as a victim. He wasn't a hero. He was a force. He walked toward me, his attention absolute. Ignoring the men from the Belmonte Trust, his presence changed the air, made it heavier, charged. "The phone," he said. His voice was deeper than I remembered, rough, like gravel in expensive whiskey. He wasn't asking, he was demanding. I was frozen, trapped between the hunters and this new, terrifying storm. He looked at me, and his eyes weren't angry. They were worse. They were analytical. They were reading me, calculating the risk I represented in a microsecond. He held out his hand for the phone, then, almost imperceptibly, jerked his chin to the side, a signal. 3 sounds, sterile and quick. Pop, pop, pop. Not the roar of a handgun, silenced rounds. I saw the glint of metal from the roof of the warehouse opposite, a sniper. The men from the SUV dove for cover, firing blindly into the dark. This man, Rafe, didn't flinch. He didn't even look at the warehouse. He moved toward the nearest Belmonte gunman, who had recovered and was leveling his pistol. Rafe didn't duck or weave. He moved inside the man's reach, grabbed the extended wrist with one hand, the elbow with the other, and twisted. The sound was not the wet thud from the alley. It was a clean, sharp snap of bone, loud even in the rain. The gunman screamed, a choked, agonizing sound as his weapon clattered to the wet concrete. Rafe didn't look at the man's face as he crumpled. His protection team, shadows detaching from other shadows, emerged from the dark, efficiently neutralizing the other gunmen, disarming them, binding them with a brutal, practiced economy of motion. I stood shaking, my back pressed against the cold steel of the crane. The smell of ozone from the silenced rounds cut through the heavy, briny scent of the sea. I was alive. I was alive because a stranger had just broken a man's arm like he was snapping a breadstick, and he hadn't even spilled his drink. Distant sirens wailed, growing closer, the real police. Rafe's team vanished, taking the Belmonte men with them. The black SUV's engine was cut, left empty. The entire engagement had lasted less than a minute. Rafe turned to me. He strode over, his face unreadable in the gloom, and grabbed my arm. His grip was not gentle. It was steel. He didn't speak. He pulled me, stumbling toward a black sedan I hadn't even seen, parked in the deepest shadow of the pier. He pushed me into the passenger seat and slammed the door. The sound was heavy, final. He slid into the driver's side. The car's engine was already humming, a low, powerful thrum I could feel in my bones. He pulled away from the curb just as the first blue and red lights washed over the empty quay. He drove without lights, navigating the industrial labyrinth with an animal familiarity. "You touched the tripwire of a war," he said. His voice was terrifyingly calm, a low rumble that filled the cabin. He looked at me, his eyes pinning me to the seat. "Now you're my asset, or you're their loose end." I stared out the passenger window, watching the rain track down the glass. The drops slid down like the closing items on a checklist, sealing my fate. That call, that 911 call, it wasn't a plea for help, it was a signature. I had locked myself into a world I didn't understand, run by a man whose face could unlock a phone meant for a king. I had nowhere else to look. I turned back to him. My chin was trembling, but I jammed it against the headrest, refusing to cry. That was when I saw it. His hand was steady on the expensive leather steering wheel. Dark blood dripped from the cuff of his white shirt, stark against his skin. It wasn't his. It had to be from the man whose arm he'd broken. "You're bleeding," I whispered. The words were stupid, small. He glanced at his wrist, then dismissed the blood with an impatient flick. He didn't care. But his eyes, those cold, analytical eyes, didn't move back to the road. They stayed on me. He wasn't looking at my terror anymore. He was looking at the stubbornness beneath it. He was looking at the wet, defiant spark that refused to be extinguished by the rain or the fear. And in that moment, I knew I was in more danger than I had ever been on the quay. We rode in silence, the sedan cutting through the rain-slicked streets of Philadelphia. The car was so quiet I could hear the expensive thwip of the windshield wipers. It didn't smell like a car. It smelled like leather and cold steel. The Altamari Holdings Tower wasn't just a building. It was an act of aggression against the skyline. A sheer glass razor slicing into the dark clouds above Penn's Landing. We didn't use the main entrance. Rafe drove into a private subterranean garage that sealed behind us with the heavy finality of a vault door. We ascended in a private elevator, moving at a speed that made my stomach lurch. When the doors opened, we were in an office that seemed to float in the sky. 3 walls were pure glass. The city lights a glittering carpet of diamonds and topaz far below. The rain that had terrified me on the quay now seemed like a distant, silent movie. I was still damp, my sneakers squelching on a rug that probably cost more than my college tuition. My panic had subsided, replaced by a cold, sharp dread. Rafe Altamari wasn't looking at me. He was standing behind a vast desk of dark, polished wood, staring at the phone I had stolen. A different man, older, with weary eyes and a suit tailored to perfection, stood near the window. He was introduced only as Kincaid. "It wasn't a coincidence," Rafe said. His voice was that same low gravel. But here, in his domain, it resonated with absolute authority. "It's a bait device, a failsafe." He finally looked at me, his eyes evaluating my soaked jeans and trembling hands. "That phone is biometrically keyed to me, my face, my voice. If anyone else activates it, especially for an emergency broadcast, it pings my entire security net. It's designed to catch leaks, to see who in my organization is careless enough to lose it or treacherous enough to give it away." He paused, a flicker of something unreadable in his gaze. "It wasn't designed to be stolen off the street by a bartender." My throat was painfully dry. It opened for me. My face, I saw it. "It registered a human face under acute duress," Kincaid clarified, his voice smooth and precise. "The parameters are set to allow an emergency call under anomalous activation, but its primary function isn't to help the caller. It's to alert Mr. Altamari that the device, and potentially the person holding it, is compromised." So, I hadn't been saved by a miracle. I had pulled the pin on his personal grenade. "The men at the bar," Rafe said, closing the distance between us. The intensity was physical, a pressure in the air. "You called it bookkeeping." I swallowed, forcing the memory of the thud from my mind. "Our manager, Kevin, he was arguing with them about the new system, a fintech startup, Clear Ripple." Rafe's stillness was more frightening than any rage. "Explain." "About 6 months ago, everything changed. We were always a cash-heavy bar, tips, vendors, everything. Then management said we were modernizing, all digital. Every transaction, even the cash tips, had to be logged through this app, Clear Ripple. It was supposed to be faster." "It wasn't," Rafe stated. "It wasn't a question. No, it was a nightmare. And every weekend, usually Saturday night, right after close, the system would adjust. That's what they called it, reconciliation. But the numbers were always short. Small amounts, $50 from my tips, $100 from the register. It was happening to everyone." I looked down at my hands. Kevin started keeping paper logs again, the old way. He said the digital records were evaporating. Tonight, he was going to confront them with his paper ledger. He said he had proof. That's when they balanced him. Rafe turned to Kincaid. Belmonte. Kincaid nodded grimly. Clear Ripple is their flagship fintech venture. They're using it to wash money through crypto ATMs. They need a steady, plausible stream of small denomination cash to feed the machines. Small businesses, bars, bodegas, laundromats. The pieces were clicking into place, cold and sharp. They force the tech on these businesses, Rafe continued, pacing in front of the window. They skim the profits. The businesses fall behind on their bills. Belmonte offers them a high-interest loan, using the digitally adjusted debt as leverage. Soon, they own the business. They own the silence. But why kill Kevin, I whispered. Why not just fire him? Because the public agencies are useless, Rafe said, his voice laced with pure contempt. They've been bought, broken, or intimidated for years, but there's a new player. A federal agency, the Interstate Financial Crimes Bureau, the IFCB. Operation Upstream Wind, Kincaid supplied. We've been tracking it. They're specifically targeting money laundering operations on the riverways, logistics, shipping. Rafe stopped pacing and looked directly at me. Logistics, shipping, me. Belmonte isn't just washing money. Talia, they're building a narrative. They're preparing to hand the IFCB a ready-made case, painting Altamari Holdings as the source of the rot. And your manager's paper ledger was the one piece of physical proof that could trace the rot back to their system, not mine. They couldn't have timed this escalation without help, Rafe said, more to himself than to us. The numbers they're planning to feed the IFCB have to look real. They must have access to my primary ledgers. Sir, Kincaid said, his voice dropping. Donato, last week. Rafe closed his eyes for a single, tight second. Donato was my most loyal treasurer. For 20 years, they said he had a boating accident. Donato didn't have accidents. He was meticulous. He was murdered, I realized aloud, because he found the mole. He found the vulnerability, Kincaid corrected. Tapping a tablet, a massive, high-definition screen on the wall lit up. It was a dizzying flowchart of holding companies, transaction streams, and offshore accounts. This is our current overview of the Belmonte network, mapped against ours. Donato was investigating micro-discrepancies. My head swam. It was a tangle of numbers, but then I saw something familiar, a pattern. What are those, I asked, pointing to a series of small, red timestamps. System downtimes, Kincaid said, rolling blackouts at the port for scheduled maintenance. Standard procedure. No, I said, stepping closer to the screen, the data pulling me in. That's not maintenance. We get those at the bar, too, right before the adjustments. The power flickers for just a second. The Wi-Fi routers reset. Look. I traced the line with a trembling finger. The blackout hits at 2:03 a.m. Your microevaporation. I used their word. Happens at 2:04 a.m. Every single time. It's automated. A cron job. Someone programmed the system to skim the moment the security logs reboot and are blind. The two men stared at me. The only sound in the penthouse was the faint, electronic hum of the screen. Rafe studied the flowchart, then me. His expression was intense, calculating. You're observant. The adrenaline of the analysis faded, and the night crashed back in. I have to go, I said, backing away from the screen. My mother, she's at St. Jude's. She's sick. I have to check on her. She'll be worried. You can't leave, Rafe said. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a fact. You walked out of that alley. The Belmonte Trust knows you saw something. Now, you've been seen with me. You are the only living witness who can tie their street-level murder to their high-level fintech operation. You are not safe, and neither is your mother. Ice filled my veins. You'll stay here, he commanded. In the tower, we have guest suites. You'll make a full statement to my internal security. No. The word was out before I could stop it. Small but sharp. I won't be your prisoner. I'm going to my mother. Rafe watched me, a long, unnerving silence stretching between us. He was weighing my defiance against my utility. I was an asset, just as he'd said. Fine, he said at last. He nodded to Kincaid, who retrieved something from the desk. "You won't be a prisoner. You'll be a guest." He walked me to the private elevator, its doors gleaming like polished obsidian. "A car will take you to St. Jude's. My personal driver, one of my own physicians, is already there, reviewing her charts. He will ensure she's receiving premium care." It was a threat wrapped in velvet. My mother was now under his protection, which meant she was also his hostage. He handed me a heavy, black plastic card, no numbers, just a silver crest I didn't recognize. "A temporary access card for the tower, for the car. Do not lose it." The elevator doors closed, encasing us in smoked glass and silent, descending motion. The air felt compressed. I could smell the faint, clean scent of his soap, the damp wool of his expensive coat. My heart was hammering a stupid, frantic rhythm against my ribs, a response I hated. This man was a killer. He was cold, controlling, and had just taken my mother as collateral. But he had also saved my life. The proximity was suffocating. I had to break the silence. "Why?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't look at me, watching the city lights rise as we fell. "Why what?" "Why are you doing this? The doctor, the car. Why trust me at all?" The elevator chimed, slowing our descent. Rafe turned. His body angled toward mine. The space was suddenly too small. "The Belmonte Trust thinks I'm their enemy. The IFCB thinks I'm their target. My own organization has a traitor." He met my gaze, and his eyes were clear, cold, and utterly lacking in pity. "But you stole a phone worth $10,000. You had my biometrics. You had access to my private network." The doors remained closed, holding us in suspension. "You could have run. You could have tried to sell it. You could have tried to blackmail me. But you didn't." A smile, so thin it was barely there, touched the corner of his mouth. "You called 911. The door slid open onto the waiting garage. Kincaid was already there, holding the door of the sedan. The driver stood at attention. I started to walk out, the access card suddenly heavy in my hand. "Mr. Altamari," Kincaid said, his voice tight, stopping Rafe in his tracks. He was holding his tablet, his face pale. "A perimeter flag, internal security. You need to see this." Rafe took the tablet. I paused at the car door, looking back. Rafe's face, which had been cold and controlled, hardened into something else, something volcanic. "What is it?" I asked, the dread returning. He turned the tablet so I could see it. It was security footage, a live feed from the building's main directory, 30 floors below us. "That," Rafe said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper, "is the brand new satellite office of Clear Ripple." I squinted at the screen. The cheerful, obnoxious blue and white logo gleamed under the lobby's recessed lighting. "It's in the lobby." "Not just the lobby," Kincaid clarified, his voice strained. "They lease the suite directly beneath our corporate council, Suite 3410. Rafe stared at the screen, at the name of the company that had just murdered my manager. They weren't hiding in the shadows. They were boasting. It wasn't an infiltration. It was a declaration of war, delivered to his front door. The guest suite in the Altamari Tower was on the 52nd floor. It was less an apartment and more a sterile expanse of white marble, gray furniture and glass walls that made me feel like an exhibit in a billionaire's zoo. The visit to St. Jude's had been a surreal, controlled exercise. My mother, bless her, was asleep, her breathing steady. The man Rafe had sent, this doctor, Aris, was a calm, silver-haired presence who spoke in soothing tones about her improved vitals. All while 2 of Rafe's men stood by the nurse's station. They wore suits, not scrubs. My mother was safe, but she was his. I was his. I returned to the tower just after midnight. The driver said nothing. I let myself into the silent apartment, the heavy door clicking shut, sealing me inside my gilded cage. I stood at the window, watching the city. I was 27 years old, a bartender, and I was now the guest of a man who broke bones as easily as I poured shots, a man who had just declared war on another. even more terrifying organization. I tried to sleep. The bed was too soft, the silence too loud. I was just drifting off when I heard it. A faint click from the living area. Not the door. The high-tech panel by the window. I sat up, my heart instantly pounding. I hadn't been given a key. I hadn't been given a code. The only way in or out was the black access card Rafe had given me, which was clutched in my hand under the pillow. Another sound, the whisper of expensive fabric. Someone was inside. I didn't scream. My training from the key took over. I slid off the bed, grabbing the heaviest thing I could find, a glass water carafe from the bedside table. I crept into the living room. It was pitch black, the city lights blocked by heavy, automated drapes I hadn't touched. The intruder was gone. But something was on the low glass coffee table, a thick, manila envelope. It hadn't been there when I arrived. A piercing shriek, electronic and deafening, exploded from the wall panel. The main alarm, the lights flashed on, bathing the room in a sterile, blinding white. I barely registered the alarm. My eyes were fixed on the envelope. The apartment door burst open, and Rafe was there. Not in a suit, but in dark tactical pants and a black Henley that stretched across his shoulders. He held a handgun, held low and steady. He was here. He hadn't come from the elevator. He must have been in the tower, on a different floor. He was there before the building security, before anyone. He didn't look at me. He swept the room, checking the terrace, the bedroom, his movements economical and lethal. He went to the wall panel, his thumbprint silencing the shriek, but not before I saw a red light already blinking on it, a silent alarm, his alarm. The alarm had been a message, a performance. "You're secure," he said. His voice a low command. He walked to the drapes and pulled the cord, the heavy fabric sliding shut, blocking the glass, blocking the view. He was creating a bunker, a solid, safe space. "Are you hit?" he asked, finally turning to me, his eyes scanning me for injury. "No," I whispered. I pointed at the table. They left that." I was trembling, a violent, full-body shudder. The water carafe slipped from my numb fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The sound broke my control. My knees gave out. I can't breathe," I gasped, sinking to the floor, my back against the sofa. The panic from the key was back, but 10 times worse. This was an invasion. They had gotten to me here. Rafe was in front of me in an instant. He holstered his weapon. He didn't touch me, not with pity. He crouched, his large frame blocking out the room, forcing my world to shrink to just him. "Look at me, Talia." His voice was not soft. It was harsh, a steel rod to grip. "Breathe with me, now. In through your nose, count 4. I tried, but my breath hitched, a sob of pure terror. 4, he insisted. "Hold it, 7, count it in your head. 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I held my breath, my lungs burning, my vision spotting. "Out," he commanded, his voice a low, steady rumble. "Through your mouth, 8. I exhaled, a ragged, shuddering gasp. Again in 4, hold 7, out 8, match my breathing, watch me. I focused on him, on the steady, controlled rise and fall of his shoulders. His eyes never left mine. They were dark, unblinking, an anchor in the storm. I matched him. In for 4, hold for 7, out for 8. The killer from the docks, the man who owned this city's shadows, was breathing me back to life. The trembling didn't stop, but it centered. The air returned to my lungs. This harsh tenderness, this clinical, focused act of control was more intimate than a gentle hand. I was shaking for an entirely different reason now. "Good," he said, standing. He didn't offer a hand. He expected me to get up. I did, my legs unsteady. His team, Kincaid and 2 others, were at the door, their faces grim. Kincaid moved to the envelope, handling it with gloved hands. The terrace lock was bypassed. Kincaid said, "Professional, clean, they wanted to be seen." He opened the envelope and slid the contents onto the table. It was a single, high-resolution photograph. My mother. She was in the hospital courtyard, sitting in a wheelchair, doctor, Aris standing beside her, smiling. And tucked into the corner of the envelope, a small, typed note, 2 words. "Don't talk." Rafe looked at the photo, then at me. His face was granite. "Get her back to the penthouse. Full analysis. Now." The war room was different this time. It was energized by a cold, controlled fury. "They're proud," Rafe said, pacing in front of the whiteboards. "They didn't just breach my tower. They photographed my man with your mother and used it as a calling card." "Security feeds picked up a utility van parked across the street," Kincaid said, his fingers flying across a tablet. "Bad plates, but the vehicle registration is a shell. Beryl Maritime." "The crypto ATM company," I said. "The pieces connecting. The ones Belmonte uses to move the machines." "Exactly," Kincaid confirmed. "They're not just moving machines, they're moving muscle. This was Belmonte's message." "They're moving too fast," Rafe said. "They're sloppy, arrogant." He grabbed a black marker and went to the whiteboard. "This all comes back to the money, the leak, Talia, the bar, the deposits." "Every night," I said, my voice stronger now, the fear hardening into anger. "Kevin collected the cash and logged the digital tips, but the reconciliation, the big skim, that was only once a week. Sunday morning, always Sunday." "The cron job," Rafe said, his eyes lighting up. "It always hit at 2:03 a.m., I said, the memory sharp. "Right after the last call rush, just before we started the final closeout, the system would freeze, then reboot. Kevin hated it." Rafe's marker flew across the board. He drew a box for Beryl Maritime. He drew one for Clear Ripple. He drew an arrow between them. They use Beryl to place the machines. They use Clear Ripple to wash the skimmed cash. He drew another box, anonymous crypto wallet. An arrow pointed to it. "It's not enough," I said, walking toward the board. Rafe paused, marker in hand. "Explain." "This is street level. This is digital. But cash is heavy. To make this much dirty money float, to have clean reserves ready to swap for the dirty digital entries, you can't just use 1,000 corner stores. You need a partner, a real partner." I picked up a red marker. "You're missing the bank." Kincaid looked up. "A bank, the compliance hurdles." "Not if you own the bank," I countered, my street sense logic finally finding its footing in this high-tech world. Or at least, own the man who runs it. They need a regional bank, big enough to handle the float, small enough to control, one that's hungry. I drew a new box, in red, and connected it to Clear Ripple. Inside it, I wrote the name I'd heard the suits at the high-top tables whisper, the ones who bought $1,000 bottles and laughed too loud, Trust Peer bank shares. Silence. Rafe looked at the board. He looked at me. A flicker of, not approval, but acknowledgement. He capped his black marker. "Kincaid," Rafe said, "run Trust Peer, everything now." "We strike at the joint," Rafe said, pointing to the arrow between Clear Ripple and Trust Peer. "We hit them at the transfer, at 2:03 a.m. The source node for the Clear Ripple skim is a satellite data center," Kincaid reported, already pulling up schematics. "Disguised, it's in Fishtown Works, the old turbine factory, the one they turned into a tech art incubator hub." "We go tonight," Rafe said. "We can't wait until Sunday. That photo proves they're escalating. We'll trigger the transfer manually if we have to, but we're getting that data." "I'm going with you," I said. Rafe and Kincaid both turned to me. "No," Rafe said. It was final. "You need me," I insisted, my voice shaking but firm. "That place is a maze of artist studios and key-carded startups. You go in looking like you," I gestured to his tactical gear, "and you'll have alarms in 10 seconds, but I look like a graveyard shift barista. I look like a cater waiter. I can get in. I know how these systems feel. I know how to look like I belong where I don't." Rafe stared at me, a long, calculating gaze. He was weighing the risk. He was weighing my life against the mission. I saw the exact moment he made the decision. His eyes hardened. "Kincaid, get her a vest, thin profile, and a panic button. Level 1. 10 minutes later, I was no longer Talia the bartender. I was wearing a lightweight, unbelievably thin vest under my hoodie that felt cold and stiff against my ribs. Rafe stood in front of me. He was holding a tiny, black device, a collar microphone. "This is live," he said. "We'll have audio at all times. Kincaid will be your eyes from the van. You do exactly as he says. Understood?" "Understood." I breathed. He stepped closer, into my space. The heat from his body washed over me. He reached up to fasten the mic to the collar of my shirt. His fingers brushed the skin on my neck, just below my ear. It wasn't a caress, it was a technical necessity, but my breath hitched in my chest. His knuckles grazed the pulse point on my throat as he secured the wire. The touch was impersonal, precise, and it set my entire nervous system on fire. I felt protected. I felt incinerated. I was terrified of him, and in that moment I trusted him with my life. He met my eyes, his face inches from mine. You freeze, you run, you panic, you hit the button, but you do not talk to them. You are a ghost. "I'm a ghost," I repeated, my voice hollow. The drive to Fishtown Works was silent, the sedan a bubble of tension cutting through the sleeping city. I stared out the window, my heart a trapped bird. "We're 3 blocks out," Rafe said. "They're dark." As he said it, I caught a flicker of movement in the side mirror, a small, red light keeping pace with us from above. "Rafe," I said, my voice tight, "we have company, in the air." Rafe checked his mirror. He didn't curse. He didn't speed up. "Kincaid, we're painted. Rooftop level." The sedan turned a corner, and suddenly Rafe slammed the brakes and yanked the handbrake. The world spun. The tires screamed as the car executed a perfect 180-degree turn, the engine roaring. We were now facing the way we came. The drone, a black insect-like shape, zipped past us, overcorrecting. Rafe's window was already down. He wasn't holding his handgun. He was holding a sleek, rifle-like device I'd never seen before. He didn't aim at the drone. He aimed in front of it. He pulled the trigger. There was no bang. There was only a low, electric thrum, like a giant guitar string being snapped. The drone's red light vanished. It tumbled from the sky, dead, crashing onto the wet pavement a block behind us. Rafe's window slid up. He put the car back in drive and pulled into the alleyway. "Electromagnetic pulse," he said, as if commenting on the weather. "The line is clean. Kincaid, we're on foot." Fishtown Works was a skeleton of old industry, given new flesh by tech startups. The 19th century turbine factory was now a sprawling hub of exposed brick, glass cubes, and self-consciously disruptive art. It smelled of ozone, old machine oil, and freshly roasted, overpriced coffee. "Kincaid, am I clear?" My voice was a whisper, lost in the noise of the late-night wind. "Clear," Kincaid's voice answered, crisp and sterile in my hidden earpiece. "The Clear Ripple office is listed as a long-term interactive art installation. Suite 212. Expect minimal security, heavy on automated alerts." I pushed the catering cart, its wheels squeaking slightly. I wore a cheap black polo shirt, black pants, and a look of profound exhaustion that wasn't hard to fake. The tray on top held a large coffee urn, long cold, and a box of assorted sugar packets and stirrers. "Talia, stay by the northeast entrance. Rafe is on the roof," Kincaid murmured. I stopped, pretending to wipe down the urn. "Roof access secured." Rafe's voice suddenly cut in, low and breathless. "I'm at the primary HVAC unit. Kincaid, deploy the mask." "Masking vibration sensors now," Kincaid replied. "He's feeding a counterfeit vibration load into the system. It will fool the sensors into thinking the roof is empty and still. You have 3 minutes of sensor blindness. Go, Talia. Your access code is 9941. I walked to the glass door of Suite 212. The sign on the door read, "Kinetic Data Flow, a Study in Movement." I typed in the code. The lock clicked green. I pushed the door and stepped inside. The room was freezing. It was vast, dark, and filled with what looked like tall, black sculptures, humming faintly. It was a server farm disguised as art, rows and rows of humming black towers, their status lights blinking in the dark like malevolent constellations. "I'm in," I whispered. "It's just servers." "Look for the primary terminal. It should be sectioned off." Kincaid guided. I found it in the back, a small, glassed-in office. The door was unlocked. I sat at the workstation, the hard drive shield Rafe had given me in my hand. It looked like a normal USB stick. "Plug it in," Kincaid said. "I'm bypassing their firewall now." I inserted the drive. The screen flickered, a line of code scrolling too fast to read. "It's working. It's downloading." I looked out at the server racks, at the thousands of blinking lights. They weren't random. I watched one rack, then another. There was a rhythm. A single red light blinking on every tower, in perfect unison. "Kincaid, I'm seeing a pulse," I said, my eyes scanning the room. "A synchronized red blink. It's regular." I timed it against the digital clock on the desk. Blink 1, 2, 3. I counted. It was slow, painfully slow. "It's a 73-second cycle," I whispered. "Stand by," Kincaid said. There was typing. "Talia, you're right. 73 seconds. It matches the automated cron job, the 2:03 a.m. skim. That pulse is the heartbeat. It's the moment the system reconciles and writes the skim data before the local security logs can capture the event." This was it, the digital fingerprint of the theft. "I'm at the junction box," Rafe's voice cut in, sharp and focused. I could hear wind whipping in his microphone. "I'm downloading the primary routing logs. They're sloppy." A pause. "Kincaid, are you seeing this?" "I see it," Kincaid said, his voice tight. "There's a whitelist entry in their outbound traffic logs, an authorization code." "What is it?" I asked, watching the download bar creep across the screen. 50%. IFCB, Rafe said, the name hitting me like a physical blow. The Interstate Financial Crimes Bureau. "They're being tracked," I whispered, my blood running cold. "No," Rafe said, and I could almost hear the cold smile in his voice. "It's the opposite. This isn't a federal trace. It's a forgery. They've embedded a fake IFCB authorization code into their data packets. When Belmonte moves the dirty money, it's tagged with this ghost code. Any bank algorithm, any auditor, sees the flag and backs off, assuming it's part of an active federal investigation. It's not a shield, I realized. It's a weapon. They're creating a digital footprint, Maz, a trail of breadcrumbs. A trail that leads wherever they want it to," Rafe finished. "A trail they can use to frame anyone, including me." The download bar hit 99%. Beep, beep, beep. A harsh, electronic alarm blared from the hallway outside the suite. A red light flashed above the door. "Movement," Kincaid snapped. "Hallway, a guard. He's off his patrol schedule. He's coming your way." The download complete. The screen flashed ejected. I yanked the USB drive. "Talia, leave the cart. Get out now," Kincaid ordered. I looked at the drive. I looked at the glass door. The guard was fumbling with his keys at the end of the hall. I wouldn't make it. I did the only thing I could. I spun to the catering cart, grabbed the box of sugar, and jammed the USB stick deep inside, burying it among the paper packets. "Rafe, she's trapped," Kincaid said. "Block the roof door," Rafe's voice commanded. A heavy, metallic thunk echoed through my earpiece. "The magnetic wedge is set. It will hold the roof access for 2 minutes. Tops, I'm moving, Talia. You are the priority. Leave the drive." "I can't," I whispered. "I have it. I'm walking out." I pushed the cart, the squeaking wheel sounding like a scream in the silent building. I opened the suite door and walked into the hallway, right toward the approaching guard. He was a big man, his uniform straining. "Hey, what are you doing here? This wing is closed." I stopped. Just as I was about to speak, a different door opened 20 feet away. A man in a $900 hoodie and designer glasses stepped out. He had a clear Ripple ID badge. He looked annoyed. "What's all this?" he asked, looking at the guard, then at me. "Catering left at 10. Who are you?" My mind went white with panic. Then, I let the panic take me. I let the night, the fear, the image of my mother in the hospital rise to the surface. It wasn't a performance. It was the truth. Tears, hot and real, welled in my eyes. "I'm sorry," I choked out, the words thick. My mother, she's at St. Jude's. She took a bad turn. I'm working a double shift to pay for it, and I'm just trying to clear the last of the trays before I go see her. I must have gotten the schedule mixed up. Please, I'm just trying to leave." I was crying. The exhaustion was real. The fear was real. The story about my mother was real. The tech employee's face instantly changed, his arrogance dissolving into awkward pity. The guard looked embarrassed. "Oh," the tech guy said. "Hey, it's fine. Don't worry about it." "Jesus, kid," the guard mumbled. Go on, get out of here. Hope she's okay." "Thank you," I whispered, pushing the cart past them, my head down, not daring to let them see anything but my shame and grief. I didn't run until I hit the main lobby. I pushed the cart out the front door and into the alley, where Kincaid was waiting in a dark van, the side door sliding open. "Get in," he yelled. I scrambled in, dragging the sugar box with me, and the van was moving before the door was shut. "Rafe," I gasped, my heart trying to escape my chest. "He's clear," Kincaid said, not looking at me, his eyes on 3 different screens. "He's off the roof and meeting us at the fallback." As he spoke, he tapped a screen, and a distorted radio transmission filled the van. All assets confirmed for the Harborfield event. The patronage conference is a go. Belmonte will be handling the full wash in person. Kincaid killed the audio. Rafe intercepted that from the roof, Belmonte's private channel. We picked up Rafe 2 blocks later. He slid into the van, his face dark, his black gear damp from the rain. He just looked at me. I held up the sugar box. I kept it. We were back in the penthouse. The sun was threatening to rise, turning the sky a bruised, sickly purple. The USB drive was plugged into Rafe's main console. The sugar box sat on his desk like a trophy. I was staring at the data, the adrenaline fading, leaving a bone-deep weariness. "I found it," I said, my voice hoarse. "It's not just the transaction logs. It's a political donation ledger, routed from TrustPeer bank shares." Kincaid pulled up a news feed on the adjacent screen. "Look," I said, pointing. "The dates. TrustPeer makes a donation to a PAC. 2 days later, the IFCB raids a small, independent shipping company. Every single time. A donation, a raid, a donation, a raid, for 6 months." Rafe stood over my shoulder, his presence a heavy weight. "They're not just framing me," he said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "They're pruning the garden. They're using the IFCB as their personal weapon to eliminate my smaller competitors, one by one." He put it all together, his mind working with terrifying speed. "They're building a model. They use Clear Ripple to inject dirty money into these small firms. They use the fake IFCB tag to steer the real feds. The feds bust the small firm, building a pattern of crime in the Philadelphia logistics sector. Belmonte and TrustPeer get to look like clean partners, helping the investigation. And when the pattern is strong enough," I whispered, finishing his thought. "They'll deliver the final piece of the puzzle," Rafe said, tapping the audio file from the radio intercept. "The keystone, a fabricated dossier pointing all that pattern of crime directly at Altamari Holdings. They'll use the IFCB to seize my assets and revoke my licenses. This isn't a shakedown. It's a decapitation." He looked at the note. The patronage conference, Harborfield Casino, Atlantic City. "That's the execution," Kincaid said grimly. "They're presenting their case to their silent partners and the corrupt officials they've bought." "Then we're going," Rafe said. He looked at me, his eyes dark. Not with a request, but a new, cold calculation. "They're selling a story. We're going to give them a new one. We need to get our proof, that drive, into the hands of the only person in that room who might be desperate enough to use it." Rafe did not take me back to the tower. The risk of another breach, he said, was too high. Instead, He drove south, his hands steady on the wheel, the silence in the car thick and heavy. We left the city's electric grid behind, plunging into the dark, marshy roads near the naval shipyard until we reached Ridley Cove. It was not a marina. It was a private inlet, hidden by tall reeds, where a single, dark structure sat on pilings over the water, a boathouse. He cut the engine. The only sounds were the wind whistling through the reeds and the rhythmic, hollow lap, lap, lap of water slapping against the wooden stilts beneath us. It was the most isolated, quiet place I'd ever been. Inside, it smelled of old, damp cedar, marine diesel, and salt. A single yellow bulb hummed over a long wooden table covered in navigation charts. This was not a guest suite. This was a safe house, a place to plan, a place to disappear. I stood in the center of the room, my arms wrapped around myself, the thin ballistic vest still strapped to my chest. We were utterly alone. Rafe didn't turn on more lights. He stood by the sliding glass door that led to the dock, his silhouette a dark, imposing shape against the moonlit water. He was staring out at the black river, but I knew he wasn't seeing it. "I trusted someone once," he said. His voice was different here, stripped of the penthouse's echo. It was lower, rougher, completely my older brother, Matteo. He was the one who was supposed to run all of this, the one with the clean hands, the legitimate mind. He paused, and the sound of the water filled the silence. We were vetting a new partner for the container freight division. Matteo said they were clean. I trusted his analysis. I told him he was clear to meet them. He turned from the glass, and his eyes, deep in shadow, found mine. They found him on Pier 9 2 days later. He had bled out. He was 28. That was the price of my trust. The confession hung in the air, heavy and cold as the river water. He wasn't a mafia boss in that moment. He was just a man who had lost his brother. "I hate your world, Rafe," I whispered. The words were quiet, but they felt loud in the small space. "I hate this, the violence, the price of things." I walked to the other side of the room, needing the distance. My father was a cook. He had a food truck, the best carnitas in South Philly. He worked 18-hour days. He took a business loan from a man at Trust Pier Bank Shares to buy a new engine. I could see my father's hands, stained with grease and chili, strong and calloused. He got sick, pneumonia. He was in the hospital for 2 weeks, and he missed one payment. They didn't send a letter. They sent 2 men. They took his truck, and they broke his hands so he couldn't cook for anyone else. The tears I'd held back in the tech hub, the tears I'd faked for the guard, they were real now, hot and angry. He died 6 weeks later. The doctors said it was his heart, but it wasn't. It was the injustice. It was the system that crushed him for being 48 years old and decent. The space between us, the dark, damp air of the boathouse, was no longer empty. It was filled with our ghosts. The brother he lost to betrayal. The father I lost to systemic cruelty. We were orphans of the same brutal city. He crossed the room in 2 strides. He didn't reach for me. He didn't offer comfort. He stopped in front of me and looked down at my hands, which I had clenched into fists, gently. He took my right wrist, his grip warm, and turned my arm over. His thumb, rough and calloused, brushed over the small, silvery white scar on my forearm, a burn I'd gotten from the high-pressure steam wand at the bar months ago, a mark of my world. "My brother died because I was naive," Rafe said, his voice thick. "Your father died because he was decent." He met my gaze, and his eyes were not cold. They were burning with a fierce, profound intensity that made my stomach clench. Talia," he whispered, his thumb still stroking that scar. "You are proof that something clean can still exist in this city, and they will not contaminate you. I don't know who moved first. Maybe neither of us. Maybe the space between us just collapsed. It was not a gentle kiss. It was a collision. It was all the pent-up terror of the key, the adrenaline of the data heist, the shared grief in this boathouse, all igniting at once. His mouth was on mine, urgent and hot, a claim, his arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me against the solid, unyielding wall of his chest. And I wasn't his asset, I wasn't his guest, I was his anchor. I gripped the front of his shirt, my fingers digging into the fabric. The kiss was desperate, then it broke, and he came back. Slower this time. The hunger was still there, but it was tempered by a search, a question. His hand slid from my waist up to my nape, his fingers tangling in my hair, tilting my head. His thumb stroked the line of my jaw, a rough, possessive, yet tender touch. My own hand slid up his chest, feeling the frantic, heavy beat of his heart pounding in time with mine until they cupped his face, my fingers threading into the hair at his temples. He tasted of the cold night air and a heat that was all his own. His long coat slid from his shoulders, forgotten, pooling on the old wooden floor. My hoodie felt paper-thin against the heat radiating from his skin, and a shiver traced its way down my spine, a response to the warmth of his hands in the cold, damp air. We whispered each other's names against each other's lips. It was a question, an answer, a surrender. The sound was lost, stolen by the rhythmic slap of the waves beneath our feet. He pulled back. It was only an inch, but it was a chasm. He rested his forehead against mine, his breathing harsh, his chest heaving. We stayed there, breathing the same air, suspended in the moment. My lips were swollen, tingling. My heart felt like it was going to break through the thin vest I still wore. The air between us was electric, but the boundary was drawn. He had stopped. He had given me back the choice. After a long, shuddering moment, we separated. The heat remained, a low, thrumming hum beneath the surface, but the sharp focus of the mission returned. We sat at the table, and he opened a laptop, and the cold blue light of the Harborfield Casino blueprints illuminated his face. The passion we'd just shared was channeled, not dismissed. It was forged into a new, sharp-edged trust. "We need protocols," I said. My voice was husky, but it didn't tremble. "Real ones, for Atlantic City, if this goes wrong." "Kincaid will be running tactical oversight from a surveillance van," Rafe said. "All business once more. Plan B is a fire alarm. Plan C is a security lockdown triggered by Kincaid. We do not separate." "No," I countered. "That's not what I mean. We need a word that means save yourself, not regroup, a word that means the mission is dead, and we get out. No senseless sacrifices. No one bleeds out on a pier." His eyes met mine across the blueprints. He understood. "No senseless sacrifices," he repeated, his voice a low vow. "The word is Ridley. If either of us says Ridley, the other one leaves. No arguments, no looking back. We live." He reached into the pocket of his pants and placed a heavy, metal object on the table. It was not a weapon, it was a ring. A man's signet ring, brushed silver, heavy and severe. The crest was the same one from the black access card, an Altamari crest I didn't recognize. "This is not a promise," he said, his voice low and serious, his gaze holding mine. "It's not that—" He pushed it across the table. "It is a key. It is my inner circle's fail-safe, the highest level. If you are ever in danger, you press the stone. My entire security net, my personal team, they will activate. They will tear down walls to get to you. No questions asked, whether I am there or not." I picked it up. It was heavy and still warm from his body. I looked at him, at this lethal, controlled man who had just handed me his entire kingdom's panic button. "You're trusting me with this," I whispered. It wasn't a question. "I'm trusting you to use it," he replied. I slid the ring onto the middle finger of my right hand. It fit perfectly. It was a chain. It was a shield. I closed my fist, the metal cool against my palm. I was no longer an asset. I was trusted. We planned for hours. We memorized the faces of Silas Bren, Dahlia Voss, and the Phantom IFCB director, Nora Cade. We memorized exit routes and the timing of the casino's security patrols. We didn't sleep. As the first sickly gray light of dawn began to stain the sky, the wind died, the river, which had been so turbulent, turned to flat, gray glass. The eye of the storm had passed. We walked out of the boathouse and into the cold, sharp morning. Rafe opened the car door for me. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The silence itself was a vow, heavier and more binding than any words. The Harborfield Casino was a monument to manufactured hope, rising from the Atlantic City shore like a gaudy, neon-lit jewel. Tonight, it wasn't just taking money, it was washing it. The grand ballroom was packed for the Urban Financial Security Patronage Conference, a name so boring it had to be a lie. It was a gala for the city's wolves, all gathered to congratulate each other on their kills. "Kincaid, we're in." Rafe's voice was a low murmur, meant only for the mic pinned under his lapel. "I have you," Kincaid's voice replied in my earpiece. "Talia, your signal is strong. The server room is 1 level below you, past the staff bulkhead." I walked 2 steps behind Rafe's right shoulder, playing my part. I was Talia Quintero, paralegal. My hair was pulled into a severe bun. I wore non-prescription glasses with thick black frames, a simple gray linen sheath dress, and sensible, silent flats. I carried a leather-bound portfolio and a tablet. I was invisible. And in this room, invisible was a superpower. Rafe was the opposite. He was pure, unadulterated presence, in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. He moved through the crowd like a shark, polite and lethal, parting the sea of politicians and venture capitalists. We saw them almost immediately, holding court near the towering ice sculpture of a swan. Silas Bren, CEO of TrustPeer Bankshares, was laughing. It was a loud, practice sound. His face was tanned, his teeth too white, his smile painted on with expensive lacquer. Beside him was Dahlia Voss. Dahlia, the CEO of Clear Ripple, was everything I wasn't. She was poured into a dress of emerald green silk, her black hair a perfect, shining cascade. She was soft, all curves and gentle smiles, but her eyes, as they scanned the room, were as cold and hard as the ice sculpture beside her. They were the eyes of a CEO, a predator. "Targets acquired," Rafe murmured. "Where is she?" "Nora Cade," Kincaid supplied. "By the West Terrace doors. Gray suit. Looks like she's avoiding everyone." I saw her. Director Cade was a woman in her 50s, with tired hair and a look of profound, exhausted stress. She was the one holding the ambiguous federal power. She was the one drowning in a sea of sharks. And she was the one we had to reach. "Talia, go," Rafe said, his eyes fixed on Silas Bren. "You have 10 minutes. I nodded. Once. And peeled away from his side, melting into the crowd, just another overworked assistant heading for the staff corridor. I slipped through the staff-only door into a world of stainless steel and fluorescent lights. "Clear," Kincaid whispered in my ear. "Second door on your left. Code is 6363. The server room was loud, a wall of white noise from the fans. I found the main inbound terminal, my hands moving quickly. I pulled the shadow ledger device from my portfolio. It looked like a simple surge protector, and plugged it into the wall. Then I connected the casino's main feed into my device. From this moment on, every single transaction at the gala, every donation, every credit card swipe was being cloned and streamed directly to my tablet. "Device is live," I whispered, closing the cabinet. "I'm out." I blended back into the party just as Rafe made his move. He approached Silas Bren, his hand extended, a mask of professional courtesy firmly in place. "Silas, good to see you off the mainland," Rafe said, his voice smooth. "Rafe, I wasn't sure you'd make it." Silas beamed, his white teeth flashing. "A bit chaotic on the Philly waterfront. I hear all these federal investigations. It's so hard to do business." "It is," Rafe agreed, his smile not reaching his eyes. "Which is why I wanted to talk. My Altamari contracts at the port are up for renewal. I'd hate for there to be any friction, especially with TrustPeer." Silas's smile tightened. He understood. This was a negotiation. Friction is just a part of life, Rafe. Unless one pays for a smoother road, a convenience fee, let's say, to ensure the proper agencies are focused elsewhere. It was a blatant shakedown, right in the middle of the party. I'm always willing to invest in convenience, Rafe said, his voice dangerously soft. Silas clapped him on the shoulder, his painted-on smile firmly in place. That's why we get along. You see, Rafe, on the shore, no one is innocent. We're just different levels of practical. I turned away, my stomach twisting. I needed air. I headed toward a quieter hallway, lined with floor-to-ceiling mirrors, my eyes on the tablet in my hand. The data was already flooding in. That's a very lonely look for a party. I froze. Dahlia Voss was standing right behind me. Her reflection multiplied 100 times in the mirrored walls, surrounding me. She hadn't made a sound. I looked up from the tablet, my heart pounding against my ribs. The heavy ring on my finger was a cold weight. I'm just reviewing my boss's schedule, I said, my voice thin. The perfect paralegal. Dahlia smiled, a slow, beautiful, venomous expression. She stepped closer, the scent of expensive perfume washing over me. I've seen you in the tower. You're the new variable, aren't you? The bartender from the Key? My blood ran cold. She knew. You're smart, Dahlia continued, her voice a soft, conspiratorial whisper. I can see it behind the librarian glasses, smart enough to know when you're in over your head. She reached out as if to fix my collar, and I flinched. Her hand stopped, hovering in the air between us. Silas is a fool, she said, her voice dropping. Rafe Altamari is a relic. This is the new world. She tapped a long, red fingernail against her temple. Data, not docs, and in the new world, you have to be practical. She was echoing Silas. Don't pick the losing side. Talia, she whispered, this city doesn't reward loyalty. It only rewards survival. And Rafe, he's not going to survive this. She smiled, a final, chilling gesture, and glided away, her emerald dress disappearing back into the noise of the ballroom. Talia, breathe, Kincaid's voice snapped in my ear. She was probing. She doesn't know about the drive. Rafe is moving on Cade, now. I ducked into a small alcove, my hands shaking. I looked back at my tablet. Rafe had found Nora Cade near the terrace doors, where she was nursing a club soda, looking like a woman waiting for an execution. Director Cade, Rafe said. Nora flinched, turning. Mr. Altamari, I don't think it's appropriate for us to be seen. I don't care about appropriate, Rafe cut in, his voice low, his body shielding their conversation from the room. I care about the fact that you are being led to a slaughter, and you're planning to take my company with you. I'm a federal officer. Mr. Altamari, I don't respond to threats, Nora said, her voice tight, but her eyes were scared. This isn't a threat. It's a professional courtesy. Rafe leaned in, his smile gone. You're being fed a story by Silas Bren and the Belmonte Trust, a very clean, very compelling story. But you've only smelled the perfume. He paused. I'm about to open the jar when you smell what's really inside. Don't blame me for the stink. Just be smart enough to step out of the blast radius. Nora Cade stared at him, her pale face hardening. She was a bureaucrat. Yes, but she wasn't weak. She was cornered. I hear a lot of stories. Mr. Altamari, rumors, innuendo. I can't act on that. She looked him dead in the eye. You want me to risk my career, my life. You bring me something undeniable. You bring me the weapon, not the smoke. Until then, stay out of my way. She turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. She's in, Rafe murmured, walking back toward the center of the room. She's hooked. Talia, what do you have? I looked down at my tablet. The shadow ledger was working. The donations were pouring in, a steady stream of 5- and 6-figure amounts. I have it, I whispered, my voice shaking with discovery, not fear. I'm cross-referencing the donation timestamps with the source accounts, I said, my fingers flying. It's a loop. The money isn't stopping at the charity. It's being routed. On the screen, a real-time map of the transactions bloomed. A dozen patrons made donations. The money went to the Urban Security Fund. Seconds later, that fund made a payment for services to a shell corporation, which then transferred the exact same amount, minus a 2% fee, directly into a holding account for Clear Ripple. They're washing it, right now, in front of everyone. I breathed. Send it to her, Rafe commanded. I packaged the data, the live transaction map, the source code logs from Fishtown Works, the clear, undeniable loop. I encrypted it and sent it to the secure number Rafe had given me for Nora Cade. A sent confirmation flashed on my screen. It's done, I whispered. I wiped the tablet, pulled the plug on the shadow ledger remotely via Kincaid, and stood up. Sliding the tablet back into its portfolio, I looked across the ballroom. I saw Nora Cade standing alone, her back to the wall. She pulled out her personal phone. I watched her read the screen. I saw her hand, the one holding the phone, begin to tremble. She had her weapon. We left the harbor field through a service exit, the cold, salt-laced air a slap in the face after the ballroom's manufactured warmth. Rafe's sedan was waiting, inconspicuous, parked in the shadow of an adjoining garage. Kincaid was gone. Already mobile in the surveillance van, a ghost in the system. Rafe drove, his movements economical, his face a mask of controlled calm. We were silent, the tension from the casino, from Dahlia's threat and Nora's desperation, filling the small space. We took the expressway out of Atlantic City, the skyline shrinking in the rearview mirror. The route back to Philadelphia was dark, cutting through the vast, flat expanse of the Pine Barrens. The first drops of rain began to hit the windshield, fat and sporadic. We were just ascending the high arch of the Bracken Span, the fictional bridge connecting the outer islands to the mainland, when it happened. Headlights, blindingly bright, flared in the rearview mirror. A heavy-duty semi, a flatbed, was coming up on us impossibly fast, its horn blaring. "Hold on," Rafe said. His voice was flat. He floored the accelerator, but the sedan, though powerful, was no match for the truck's raw tonnage. It was gaining. And then I saw it. Another truck, identical, blocking the road ahead. Its lights were off. A box. A pincer. The truck behind us slammed its horn again, a mournful, angry sound. Rafe didn't hesitate. He didn't brake. He yanked the wheel to the right, sending the sedan screaming over the rumble strip and onto the narrow emergency lane. We were inches from the concrete barrier, the dark water 100 feet below us. The truck roared past, its wake buffeting our car. The second truck, the blocker, flashed its high beams, pinning us. The rain started in earnest now, a heavy, driving downpour. My heart was trying to claw its way out of my chest. The vest felt thin, useless. "Breathe, Talia!" Rafe's voice cut through my panic. He wasn't looking at me. He was watching his mirrors. 4, 7, 8, do it. I slammed my eyes shut. I breathed in for 4, held for 7, exhaled for 8. The panic receded, replaced by a cold, sharp focus. My hand was steady as I found the console. "The button!" Rafe commanded. "The black one under the panel, now!" I flipped the unmarked panel by the gear shift and slammed the black button. There was a heavy thump from the rear of the car. Thick, oily smoke billowed from our exhaust pipes, instantly enveloping the bridge in a choking, impenetrable cloud. "It won't hold them," Rafe said, accelerating into the smoke. "Driving blind? It's just concealment." A static blast erupted from the car's speakers, not the radio, the internal comm. "Talia, Talia, Talia." The voice was sing-song, slick with a cruel amusement. It was amplified, distorted, but unmistakably human. "You picked the wrong horse. Little girl. Rafe's a dinosaur. His whole organization is a tomb." My blood ran cold. "This is Marcello Ciotti," the voice purred. "Friends call me Lark. I'm Belmonte's right hand, and I'm offering you a one-time deal, a retirement plan. Step out of the car at the end of the bridge. We'll give you a new name, a new life. Keep sitting there, and you get to be buried with him." I stared at Rafe. He wasn't listening to the words. He was looking at the radio display. His face, which had been a mask of focused aggression, hardened into something I had never seen before. A cold, deep, volcanic rage. "That frequency," he said, his voice a lethal whisper. "It's not theirs, it's mine." He looked at me, his eyes black holes in the dashboard light. "It's an Altamari internal channel, encrypted. Someone from my team fed them that frequency. Someone just gave them our exact location 7 minutes ago." The betrayal was a physical blow, heavier than any truck. The ambush wasn't just Belmonte, it was his own people. We burst through the smoke cloud. The flatbed that had been behind us had slowed, but a black SUV, the same kind from the Key, was now on our tail, swerving to avoid the truck. Rafe wrenched the wheel, taking the next exit ramp, a service road for the old shipyards. The tires screamed on the wet asphalt. The SUV followed, its headlights high and blinding. The road ended in a sprawl of decaying wooden buildings and rotting piers, the old bail yard. Rafe didn't slow. He drove straight through a chain-link fence, the metal screaming, and onto the main pier. The SUV was right behind us. "The flares!" Rafe yelled, gesturing to the glove box. "Break the rear window!" I didn't question it. I grabbed the heavy-duty flashlight from the door pocket, turned in my seat, and smashed the rear windshield. The glass exploded outward into the rain. I pulled the cap from a flare, struck it, and threw the hissing, sputtering red fire straight at the SUV's grill. It was a perfect shot. The driver swerved, momentarily blinded, and hit a stack of old lobster pots, giving us a precious second. Rafe was already out of the car. He had grabbed a massive, rusted mooring hook attached to a thick, coiled rope. The SUV's driver recovered, hitting the gas. "Get down!" Rafe roared. He swung the hook, underhanded, like he was born to it. The iron spike sailed through the air and embedded itself deep in the front grille of the SUV. Rafe didn't wait. He looped the other end of the rope around a solid steel pylon. The SUV hit the end of the rope. The sound was catastrophic. The rope went taut, humming like a guitar string, and the pylon groaned. The SUV's front end was ripped clean off. The vehicle, unbalanced and still accelerating, twisted, its back end lifting, and slammed sideways into the pier's railing. The wood, old and rotten, snapped. The SUV hung there for one terrible, silent second, balanced between the pier and the dark, churning water below. Then slowly, it tipped and fell, vanishing into the blackness with a heavy, final splash. Silence. There was only the rain, the heaving of my own breath, and the drip, drip, drip of fluid from our ruined car. Rafe was leaning against the pylon, his chest rising and falling. He was alive. I was alive. He pushed off and came back to the car, pulling me out. "We're not clear. They'll have more. We move now." He led me past the wrecked car, into the labyrinth of warehouses. He kicked open a rusted door, and we were inside a vast, dark space that smelled of creosote, dead fish, and mold. He pulled the door shut, plunging us into near total darkness. I heard him fumbling, then a click. A single, bare bulb flickered on, illuminating a small, forgotten office. There was a desk, a broken chair, and an old pot-bellied oil heater. My teeth were chattering, the adrenaline draining away, leaving me cold and shaking. I stumbled to the heater, my hands held out to the cold metal, fumbling with the knob. "Talia." I turned. Rafe was standing in the dim yellow light. His face was pale, streaked with grime, his left shoulder. His tuxedo was torn, and the white shirt beneath it was dark, soaked through, not with rain. "You're hurt," I whispered. "It was the Key, all over again, but this was worse." "It's a graze, from the glass when you broke the window," he said, shrugging off his ruined tuxedo jacket. The movement made him hiss in pain. "Liar," I said, my voice shaking. "That's not from glass. That was a bullet, from the truck." He looked at the dark, spreading stain on his shoulder, then at me. He didn't deny it. There's a first aid kit in the car, he started. We can't go back out there, I said. I ripped a strip of fabric from the bottom of my linen dress. Take off the shirt. He hesitated for the first time. I saw this controlled, powerful man hesitate. Talia. Take it off, Rafe, unless you want to bleed out in a fish warehouse. He unfastened his cuffs, his movements stiff, and pulled the ruined shirt over his head. The vest he wore was different from mine, heavier, black, and shattered on the left shoulder. The Kevlar fibers frayed where the bullet had impacted. It had stopped the round, but the force, the impact. His shoulder was a bruised, mangled mess, a shallow, ragged tear across the muscle where the bullet, or fragments of the vest, had broken the skin. It was bleeding sluggishly. Hold this, I commanded, grabbing a dirty rag from the desk and pressing it to the wound. He flinched, a sharp intake of breath. Sorry, I whispered. I was so close now. I could feel the heat radiating from his skin, a stark contrast to the cold, damp air. I could smell the metallic tang of his blood. My hands, still shaking, were gentle. I cleaned the wound as best I could with the bottled water from my portfolio. He stood perfectly still, his eyes locked on mine. He was letting me do this, letting me see him vulnerable. I took the strip of linen I had torn and began to wrap it, tightly, around his bicep and shoulder, creating a pressure bandage. My fingers brushed his bare skin, warm, alive. My breath hitched, his eyes darkened, the world shrank to this small, yellow-lit room, the sound of the rain, and the heat of his skin under my hands. When I was done, my hands lingered on his arm. I didn't pull away. You're a good liar, I whispered, my voice rough. A graze. You're a terrible paralegal, he whispered back, his voice thick. I looked up, and his face was just inches away. The intimacy of the boathouse, the fire we had banked, was roaring back to life. Here, in the grime and the danger. I couldn't stop myself. I leaned in, rising on my toes, and pressed my forehead against his good shoulder, breathing in his scent. I felt his hand, the one that wasn't injured, come up to cup the back of my head, his fingers tangling in my damp hair, holding me there. It wasn't a kiss of passion. It was a kiss of survival. I turned my head and pressed my lips, briefly, chastely, to the warm, strong line of his jaw, a promise, an acknowledgement. You're alive. I'm here. He held me for a long, shuddering second. Then, his encrypted phone, the one thing he hadn't lost, buzzed in the pocket of his discarded jacket. He let me go, his face hardening as he retrieved it. He answered, Kincaid, report. He listened. I watched his face, and every ounce of warmth, of vulnerability, turned to solid, glacial ice. Who? He said. It was not a question. It was a death sentence. He listened again, his eyes closing for a single, painful second. Leto, Ari Leto. Are you certain? Kincaid must have confirmed. Ari Leto, the head of compliance, the man Rafe's own father had hired, the one, Rafe had told me, who was the cleanest of them all. He transmitted your position, Rafe said, repeating Kincaid's report to me, his voice dead. From his terminal in the tower, 7 minutes before the ambush, Lark Chiotti was his handler. The betrayal was complete. There's more, Rafe said, still listening. His face went from anger to something else, a cold, strategic emptiness. Understood. He ended the call. What is it? I asked, already dreading the answer. What else? That was our window, he said, grabbing his vest. Nora Cade. Kincaid just got a priority alert from his federal contact. He looked at me, his eyes flat. She's been suspended, effective immediately. An anonymous tip came into the IFCB hotline, an accusation of bribery. They found $50,000 in unmarked crypto deposited in her personal account. Clear ripple. I breathed. Dahlia, they didn't just threaten her. They moved. They framed her before she could even open your data. She's sidelined. The evidence is useless. Ari Leto has compromised my entire network, and Belmonte now knows we have the drive. He stood in the center of the rotting room, his mind working, resetting, rebuilding the plan. We're burned in Atlantic City. We're burned with the feds. The tower is compromised. He looked at me, a new, cold fire lighting in his eyes. We're changing the battlefield. If they want a war, we'll give them one. But not on their terms, on mine. Where? Back to Philadelphia, he said, pulling his tattered shirt back on. There's one place they can't touch, one place I still control, down to the last spike of steel. The port. No, Rafe said, his lips pulling back in a grim smile. The port is compromised. We're going inland. We're going to Mercer Yards, the rail lines. They can have the water. I own the steel. We weren't in the penthouse. We were 5 stories underground, in a concrete-walled data sanctum that Kincaid used as his personal fortress. The air was cold, recycled, and silent save for the hum of servers. Rafe stood in the harsh fluorescent light, his bandaged shoulder a stark white against his black shirt. The name Ari Leto was on the central screen, a digital ghost that had just tried to kill us. I was the one at the terminal, my fingers flying. The betrayal had left a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth, but the data from Fishtown, the data I had clutched in a box of sugar packets, was the antidote? He didn't just leak your location, Rafe, I said, my voice echoing in the cold room. He built the weapon they're using to frame you. I brought the code up on the main screen. This is Ari's work. It's a risk profile filter, a compliance tool he designed himself. He set the parameters to automatically flag Altamari Holdings as a systemic risk, based on manufactured criteria. He was flagging your own company. A risk to whom? Kincaid asked, his face grim. To the financial system, and I said, and look where the alerts went. Every time the filter triggered, it sent a critical risk notification, a blind copy, straight to a private server registered to a shell company. Dahlia Voss, Rafe said. It wasn't a question. She was getting real-time alerts on your operations, disguised as compliance warnings, for months. I confirmed. He handed her the keys, and he compromised your fortress. Mercer Yards, Rafe stated. I nodded, my stomach tightening. I checked the vendor contracts for the yards, like you asked. The camera maintenance contract was renewed 6 weeks ago. It didn't go to your usual vendor. It went to a new company, Palladium Watch. Kincaid was already typing. Palladium Watch, registered office. 8th floor, Trust Pier Bank Shares. They're not just planning to frame you, I said, looking at Rafe. They're already inside. They own your security feeds at the yards. They've been watching your parallel ledger all along. Kincaid, Rafe commanded, his voice dropping to a lethal calm. Send the internal team. I want Ari Leto in this room. 10 minutes. Kincaid's face was pale. Sir, they're too late. He badged out of the tower 40 minutes ago, right before the ambush on the Bracken span. He's gone. Find him. We know where he is, Kincaid said, his voice strained. He's untouchable. He walked straight into the Trust Pier main building. He's invoked legal protection. He brought up a new screen, a press release, internal, from an agency I'd never heard of. He's claiming whistleblower status, Kincaid said, under the protection of the Maritime Trade Integrity Office. The MTO, I asked. A phantom, Rafe spat, the muscles in his jaw tight. A joint interagency task force that Silas Bren and Trust Pier fund almost 90% of. It's a legal fortress, a black hole for oversight. They've created their own no-warrant zone inside that bank. He's insulated. My men can't touch him. The local police can't touch him. They've checkmated us. Rafe hit the steel table with his good hand, the sound a flat, dull thud. They've locked us out of the law. They've locked us out of the feds. And now they've locked us out of my own company. No, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through the hum of the servers. Rafe turned to look at me, his eyes dark with a cold fury I hadn't seen before. They haven't, I insisted. They've locked us out of their law, the one they bought, the one they rigged. I stood up, the adrenaline from the bridge, the memory of Dahlia's smug smile. all hardening into a resolve I didn't know I possessed. They control the agencies, the traders, and the contracts, but they don't control the narrative. Not yet. "What are you saying?" Talia, Kincaid asked, his focus entirely on me. "I'm saying we stop playing in the shadows. We stop trying to beat them at their own rigged game. We use offensive transparency." Rafe's expression was unreadable. "We hold a press conference," I said, the idea forming as I spoke. Not us, not Altamari, an anonymous third party, a shell group. We leak everything. The drive from Fishtown, the transaction loop from the casino. We show the world, the real press, how Clear Ripple, Trustpeer, and Palladium Watch are all the same snake. We force the IFCB back into the game. They can suspend Nora Cade, but they can't ignore a front-page scandal. Rafe stared at me, his face a mask of stone. "A press conference. You want to expose my operations to the public, to reporters?" The idea was clearly poison to him, a complete betrayal of his code. It's uncontrolled. It puts a target on my back, on our backs, permanently. I stepped closer to him. I didn't touch his injured arm. I placed my hand flat on the center of his chest. Over the hard vest I knew he wore beneath his shirt, I felt the steady, strong beat of his heart. "They've bought the agencies," I whispered, my eyes holding his. "They've bought your employees. But the truth, the data, that's the one thing they haven't had a chance to buy yet. We have to give it to them, Rafe. All of it. We have to burn their shadows down with sunlight." He looked down at my hand on his chest, and I felt his breathing change, deepen. A long, heavy silence stretched. When he finally spoke, his voice was a low growl. "All right, we burn the ground, but if we're doing this, we do it right. We don't just give them the Fishtown drive, we give them the source." His eyes lit with a cold, strategic fire. "We give them Mercer Yards." "The yards are compromised," Kincaid interjected. "Palladium." "Palladium is watching the digital feeds," Rafe countered. "They can't touch the analog backup, the parallel ledger. It's an air-gapped system, physically disconnected from the network, in the old central switching tower. It records every container's weight and origin, hard-coded onto magnetic tape. It's the physical proof that matches the digital theft. It's the silver bullet. They're expecting me to hide it. We're going to hand-deliver it." He was fully in command now, the hesitation gone. "Kincaid, three-pronged attack. 1. Get our legal team. I want a shell organization, a citizens' integrity group. Registered and live in the next hour. They will host the press conference. Start leaking the casino data now to build a narrative. 2. I want your best tech team at the perimeter of Mercer Yards. They are to breach that switching tower and retrieve that air-gap drive. 3. He turned, his dark eyes locking on mine. "We need to make sure Belmonte is there to see it." "The bait," I breathed. "They're hunting us," Rafe said, a grim smile touching his lips. "Let's make it easy for them." My heart hammered against the ring on my finger. "Dahlia," I said. "She thinks I'm a variable. She thinks she can flip me." Rafe nodded, handing me a clean, black burner phone. "Make the call." I sat at the steel desk, Rafe and Kincaid listening in silence. I dialed the number Kincaid had pulled from the casino's private guest list. It rang twice. Dahlia Voss. Her voice was like honey, confident. "Dahlia!" I made my voice crack. I let the terror from the bridge, the exhaustion, the real, raw fear, bleed into my words. It's Talia. Talia Quintero." "Talia? What a surprise!" A pause. I could feel her analyzing me. "You sound terrible." I can't do this," I whispered, forcing a sob. "We were just... God, we were attacked on the bridge. He's bleeding. He's crazy. He's talking about a war, about burning the ground." "I told you." "Talia." Her voice was smooth, laced with the satisfaction of victory. "You chose the losing side." "Please," I begged, and the self-hatred a cold lump in my throat. "You said to be practical, to survive. I want to survive. I have the data, the drive from Fishtown. I copied it. I'll give it to you. I'll tell you everything. Just Just get me away from him. A long, delicious silence from her end. She was savoring it. Where are you? I don't know, I lied, my voice frantic. He's taking us to Mercer Yards, the old rail yard. He's obsessed with some parallel ledger in a switching tower. He's meeting his team. Please. I'm scared. He's unraveling. Stay calm, Talia, Dahlia said, her voice turning brisk. All business. She had taken the bait. You did the smart thing. Mercer Yards, the central switching tower. I'll handle Rafe, and I will secure your future. She hung up. I let the phone clatter to the desk. I looked at Rafe. She's coming. She'll be bringing Belmonte, Larciotti, all of them. As I said it, Rafe's personal encrypted phone, the one he never let out of his sight, buzzed on the table. He picked it up, his eyes scanning the screen. It's Cade, he said, his voice flat. He read the message aloud. They sidelined me, but they didn't silence me. I got your package. It's the real deal, but I can't use it buried in a file. A new message popped up. Rafe's brows drew together. She has a source. Inside Trust Pier. What? He read the new text. Dahlia Voss, Silas Bren, and Ari Leto. They're mobilizing. They just got a tip. They're all converging on Mercer Yards. Tonight. She's telling us what we already know. I said, no, Rafe said, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his face. He read the last line of the message. I'm coming, but I'm not coming alone. I'm bringing 2 independent journalists I trust with my life. You want to blow the whistle, Mr. Altamari. Then give me the whole picture. Live. He looked up from the phone, his eyes no longer cold, but burning. Kincaid, it's set. Sir. Everyone is coming to the party. So, Rafe said, Belmonte, Trust Pier, Clear Ripple, the MTIO, Nora Cade, and the press. He looked at me, the leader, the strategist, the warrior, all of it back in place. They're all walking into Mercer Yards tonight. They think it's their execution. It's our stage. I finished, my voice steady for the first time in days. The rain wasn't just falling at Mercer Yards. It was a physical presence. A cold, gray sheet that turned the labyrinth of rusted train cars into a slick, metal maze. The only light came from the sickly yellow sodium lamps high above, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with the downpour. I pulled the hood of my gray raincoat tighter. The heavy silver ring on my finger was cold against my skin, a silent promise of the violence coiled in the shadows around us. Rafe moved ahead of me, his bandaged shoulder making his movements slightly stiff, but no less lethal. He was a shadow among shadows, weaving between dormant, cold shipping containers. I followed, my boots splashing in the gravel. The only sound was the rain and the distant, heavy thud-clack of a freight train miles away. My heart was beating in time with it. Thud-clack, thud-clack. We reached the central switching tower, a 3-story brick monolith in the middle of the yard. It was dark, save for a single light in the main control room. They're here, Rafe murmured, his voice low. As if summoned by his words, a black umbrella snapped open in the darkness 20 yards away. Dahlia Voss stepped out from behind a line of boxcars. She was immaculate, her emerald green dress somehow untouched by the rain. She smiled, a calm, pitying expression. You brought her, Dahlia said, her voice carrying easily through the rain. She was speaking to Rafe, but her cold eyes were locked on me. You bring a girl into a war to keep your own hands clean. How disappointing. I'm not here because he brought me, I said, stepping out from behind Rafe, my voice sharp, my hands clenched. I'm here because I chose to be. Dahlia's smile wavered, just for a second. From the shadows behind her, more figures emerged. Silas Bren, his painted-on smile looking garish and panicked in the yellow light. Beside him, Marcello Larciotti, his hand resting inside his coat, his eyes darting, predatory. And finally, Ari Leto, the traitor, and he looked pale, terrified, but clutched a thick, red-stamped binder to his chest like a shield. The MTO file. It's over, Rafe, Silas called out, his voice thin and reedy. "Your asset is compromised. Your mole is with us. You have nothing." "He's right, Rafe," Ari Leto stammered, taking a step forward. "I've filed the full report with the Maritime Trade Integrity Office. It's all here. Your racketeering, your offshore accounts, your—" "And who are you?" A new voice, sharp and authoritative, cut through the yard. A bright white light flooded the scene, blinding us. It wasn't a police spotlight, it was a camera light. Nora Cade stepped into the circle of light, flanked by two people, a man and a woman, both holding professional-grade cameras. They weren't cops, they were journalists. "Nora," Silas sputtered, his face a mask of disbelief, "you're suspended. You have no jurisdiction here." "I'm not here as the IFCB, Mr. Bren," Nora said, her voice ringing with a newfound, cold power. "I'm here as a concerned citizen, assisting the free press." The cameras were rolling. The rules of the game had just been completely rewritten. The first person to pull a trigger, the first person to use violence, lost. They lost in front of the whole world. I looked at Rafe. His face was a mask of cold, hard calculation. He had been waiting for this. "Ari says he has a report," Rafe said, his voice calm, projecting for the cameras. He held up his good hand. In it, he was holding a small, silver hard drive, the air-gap drive. "I have one too." He tossed it, underhanded, to me. I caught it. This was my part. I pulled the portable, battery-powered projector from my bag, slammed it onto the hood of a rusted maintenance truck, and plugged in the drive. I pointed the lens at the vast, flat, rain-slicked side of a refrigerated container car. I hit the power button. An image, bright and clear, snapped into focus 20 feet wide. It was the ledger. It was the truth. "The Fishtown data was the key," I said, my voice shaking but loud, pitching it for the cameras. "This is the lock." The screen showed a flow chart. I pointed. "Here, every donation from the casino, routed through the Urban Security Fund. And here, routed again minus a 2% fee, directly to a Clear Ripple holding account." That's not possible," Ari stammered, his eyes wide with panic. "Oh, it is," I said, "because the signature on those transfers, the cryptographic key." I highlighted the string of code. "It's signed by Clear Ripple's own internal servers. And where was that money? That laundered, stolen money. It was held in a float account at Trustpeer Bank Shares." Silas Bren turned a sickly shade of gray. "You're lying. It's fabricated," he screamed. "That's forged data you can't prove." "The hash," Nora Cade said, her voice cutting him off. She was holding her phone, her thumb on the file I had sent her from the casino. "I'm cross-checking the SHA-256 hash from the Fishtown log, the data she acquired before this with the data on that drive." She held up her phone. "It's a perfect match. The data is authentic. It's untampered. It's undeniable." The blood drained from Silas's face. Lark Chiotti had seen enough. The rules of the game didn't apply to him. "Forget this," he snarled, pulling his hand from his coat. He had a gun. "Grab him, we're done playing." He lunged for Rafe. I didn't have time to think. My hand, the one with the ring, was already in my pocket. I jammed my thumb down on the cold, hard stone of the crest. The ring vibrated, a single, powerful pulse against my finger. It didn't happen in 7 seconds. It happened in one. From the top of the container car, two figures, black-clad and silent, dropped. They didn't use guns. They used the tools of the rail yard. A weighted anchoring rope snapped through the air, wrapping around Lark's gun hand, yanking it skyward. A second man hit him from behind, a nylon compression strap zipping tight around his wrists. Lark was disarmed, neutralized, and hooded before his pistol had time to hit the ground. Rafe's internal team, they had been here, above us, the entire time. The journalists' cameras had captured it all. The gun, the takedown. Ari Leto, seeing his protection gone, became desperate. He ran, not away, but at the nearest camera, shoving his red binder at the lens. "He's the criminal!" Ari shrieked, his voice cracking. Rafe Altamari. He's been running a shadow ledger for years. He's the one defrauding the city. It's all in here. The MTIO report. It's all here. The journalist recoiled, but kept filming. I stepped in front of Ari, in front of the light. He's right, I said. The entire yard went silent. Rafe's head snapped toward me. He's right that there's a shadow ledger, I clarified, my voice clear, cutting through the rain. But it wasn't built to hide his crimes. It was built to catch theirs. I turned to the camera, to the bright, white, unforgiving light. My name is Talia Quintero. 3 nights ago, I was a bartender at the Anchor and Chain. I saw 2 men from the Belmonte Trust murder my manager because he caught them skimming our tips through the Clear Ripple app. I held up my hands, showing they were empty. I ran. My phone was dead. I grabbed a stranger's phone off the street to call 911. I pointed at Rafe. It was his phone, a phone biometrically linked to him, a phone that alerted him, a phone that saved my life, and that's how this all unraveled. Not because of a task force, not because of a report, but because their own system, their own digital theft, was so arrogant that it exposed itself the second someone looked. The rain was washing over us, a cold, clean absolution. It was a baptism for the truth, washing away the grime of the lies. Dahlia Voss had been silent, her umbrella a perfect black shield. She watched Silas Bren start to weep. She watched Ari Leto get handcuffed by Nora Cade's federal agent-in-waiting. She saw the balance of power shift, completely and irrevocably. She lowered her umbrella. The rain instantly slicked her perfect black hair to her face. She looked at Rafe, her expression unreadable. Rafe, she said, her voice calm, this is messy. A misunderstanding. My company was a victim, used by TrustPeer. I can help you. I can testify. We can arrange a truce. We can leave my name and Clear Ripple out of the final report. Rafe just stared at her. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. The contempt was a living thing in the air between them. I was the one who answered. I stepped toward her, stopping just out of her reach. You're right about one thing, Dahlia, I said, meeting her cold, calculating gaze. This is a new world. It's about data. It's about survival. I gestured to the projector, to the cameras, to the cuffed men. You're smart, you're brilliant, but you chose the wrong story. And now, you're the one who isn't going to survive. Just as Nora Cade was about to cuff Silas Bren, her official phone rang, loud and shrill in the sudden quiet of the rail yard. She held up a hand, her face hardening, and answered, putting it on speaker for the cameras. Cade. A cold, synthesized voice filled the air. IFCB Central. This line is secure. We have an executive order. Director, you are to stand down. Your case is compromised. Nora's blood ran cold. Compromised by whom? I have the perpetrators? Your primary witness, Rafe Altamari, the voice droned, is the target of the real investigation. Your orders are to arrest him. Arrest him now, or you will be charged with obstruction. Rafe's team tensed, their hands moving, but I wasn't looking at them. I was listening. The voice, flat, emotionless, perfectly modulated. I knew that voice. Wait, I said, stepping forward into the light. Nora, don't. I know that voice. I looked straight into the nearest camera. It's the automated voice assistant from the Clear Ripple app, the one they use for high-security transaction verifications, the one I heard 100 times a night at the bar. Talia, this is Central Command, Nora said, her face pale. No, it's not, I insisted. I raced to the projector, my mind moving faster than it ever had. I ripped my tablet from my bag and plugged it in, overriding the ledger image. Kincaid, I yelled, knowing he was listening. Patch me through to the Fishtown Drive, the audio assets, the application files, now. The projector screen flickered, showing Kincaid's file directory. I found the audio folder. Nora, ask it to repeat the order. I commanded. Nora, catching on, held up her phone. Central, please verify your command. Arrest, Rafe, Altamari, immediately, the voice repeated. I found the file. a tutorial. I played it, amplifying it through my portable speaker. Your transaction is secure. It was the same voice, but I needed proof. I ran the timber analysis program Kincaid had loaded, splitting the screen. On the left, the live feed from Nora's phone. On the right, the file from the Clear Ripple app. The waveforms bloomed on the side of the train car, massive, visible to everyone. 2 jagged, identical signatures, a perfect match. "It's not a person," I yelled, pointing at the screen. "It's a voice synthesizer. They're spoofing your central command. It's a fake order." Silas Bren, seeing his last desperate play vaporize, turned and ran, disappearing into the dark maze of train cars. Rafe didn't even look at him. He raised his good hand, not in anger, but in a simple, coded gesture. 2 fingers, pointed toward the dark river, a mile away. His river team, the ones guarding the other end of the yards, would be moving. Silas was a mouse in a sealed box. Nora Cade, her face a mask of cold fury at being duped, snapped her phone shut. "Lock them down," she ordered her team, pointing at Dahlia and Ari Leto. "Trust Pier and Clear Ripple, all assets. We are seizing everything. Effective immediately." Ari Leto, however, wasn't finished. As the federal agents moved toward him, his face twisted into a desperate, feral smile. He raised his eyes, looking above our heads, past the lights to the dark warehouse roof opposite us. He tapped his watch, a quick, deliberate signal. I saw the movement. I saw his eyes. And in the sudden, electric silence, I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. A tiny metallic click from the darkness above, the sound of a safety being released. A sniper. I didn't think. I didn't analyze. I didn't breathe. Rafe. I threw my entire body against his, shoving him backward with all my strength. We hit the wet gravel just as the air cracked where he had been standing. A sharp, violent sting, like a whip of fire, seared across my left arm. The bullet had torn clean through the thick sleeve of my raincoat, raining, hot. Rafe grunted as we hit the ground, but his reaction was instantaneous. He rolled, covering my body with his own, shielding me from the sniper's view. His uninjured arm was a steel bar across my back, pinning me to the wet ground. He didn't pull his own weapon. He didn't fire blindly. He looked up at the journalist, who was frozen. His camera still pointed at us. "Camera, look here," Rafe roared, his voice a primal command. He pointed, not at the sniper, but at the journalist. "The light on the roof now." The journalist, reacting on pure instinct, swung the heavy, bright camera light upward, flooding the warehouse roof. There, a man, dressed in black, momentarily blinded, his rifle glinting. He was exposed. We heard a thud, the sound of a scuffle, and then Rafe's internal team had the sniper, dangling him over the edge of the roof before hauling him back. The rain was finally, mercifully letting up. It softened from a roar to a drizzle, as if the city itself was finally exhaling. Rafe rolled off me, his breathing harsh. He looked at my arm. "You're hit." "It's a graze," I whispered, echoing his words from the pier. "Just hot?" Nora Cade, unfazed, stepped back to the cameras. She was in command. "This ends tonight, based on the evidence provided by this citizen," she pointed at me, "and the testimony we have recorded. The Interstate Financial Crimes Bureau is forming a joint task force to investigate Trust Pier bank shares, Clear Ripple, and the Belmonte Trust. We will also be opening a full inquiry into the conflicts of interest and potential criminal conspiracy involving the Maritime Trade Integrity Office." The journalist zoomed in as her agents placed the air gap drive and Ari's binder into sealed evidence bags. The truth was, finally, officially, in custody. I was shaking. The adrenaline was draining away, leaving a bone-deep, rattling chill. Rafe pulled me to my feet. He didn't say anything. He just put his good arm around my waist and led me away from the lights, away from the cops, into the shadow of an open, empty boxcar. Inside, it was dry. A single, warm, yellow utility light hummed from the ceiling. We were alone. I leaned against him, my head resting on his chest, my entire body trembling. He put his hand under my chin, tilting my face up, his eyes, dark and intense, searched mine in the warm light. His bandaged shoulder was stained, his face bruised, but he was alive. We were alive. "You were grazed," he said, his voice rough. "You were too," I whispered. He touched his forehead to mine, his eyes closing for a brief second. "You pulled me from the blade, Talia," he whispered, his voice thick with an emotion I couldn't name. "Twice." And then he kissed me. It was not the desperate, frantic kiss of the boathouse. It was deep, it was slow, it was a promise. His lips were gentle, claiming me with a profound, quiet certainty. My hands came up to grip his shirt, holding on, my anchor in this storm. His good arm wrapped around my back, pulling me tight, while his other hand, the injured one, came up to cradle my face, his touch careful. We just breathed, sharing the same air, our heartbeats slowing to the same rhythm. It was a long, healing embrace, a silent vow to find a life that was less dark, less cold. His hands held me, tight and secure, but they stopped, respecting the line, the boundary that kept this safe. When we stepped back out, Nora Cade was waiting. The journalists were packing up. "Miss Quintero," she said, her voice formal but kind, "you're the key to this entire case. I'm assigning you full federal witness protection, effective immediately." "She doesn't need it," Rafe said. He stepped forward. His legal team, Kincaid at their head, was approaching, holding a stack of documents. Rafe took the top document and a pen, in front of Nora, in front of the last remaining camera. He began to sign. "What is that?" Nora asked. "It's the restructuring of Altamari Holdings," Rafe said, his voice clear and steady. "Effective immediately. We're establishing a $5 million compensation fund for the small businesses extorted by Clear Ripple. We are appointing an independent, external auditor, approved by your office. We are terminating all gray market laundering channels." He signed the last page with a flourish. "And we are voluntarily cooperating with the IFCB's investigation. You'll have everything. The real ledgers. No more games." He kept his freedom, but he had put himself into a new kind of cage, a legal one. He was choosing the light. A week later, the rain was gone. The city felt lighter. I stood at Southwark Quay, at the exact spot where I had run, where I had stolen his phone. The air smelled of salt and diesel, but the panic was gone. I pulled my own phone from my pocket. It was fully charged. A new contact notification lit up the screen, a name I hadn't put in, but one Kincaid must have added. It just said Rafe Safe Harbor. I smiled. I pressed the name. The phone rang. Once, twice. He picked up. I didn't say hello. "Are you there?" I asked. A pause, and then his voice, that deep, gravelly sound that was now my anchor, "Always here." I looked out over the water, at the skyline of the city that had tried to swallow me whole. The camera of my memory pulled back, taking in the steel and the water. The storm was over. The city and I took a long, deep breath. Thank you so much for listening to our story. We would love to hear your thoughts. Please comment below and let us know where in the world you are listening from. To connect and share your thoughts, subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and if you enjoyed this, please like the video and support us further by hitting that hype button to help this story be heard by more people.